Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 40 of the Weekly Gym. I've done 40 of these, probably a few more because we lost count at one point. This one is called cluster work. You know what a cluster is, right? Well, cluster work is, it's not vulgar, but the normal cluster thingy is a disastrously mishandled situation or undertaking. And cluster work is kind of the same thing, but it's when the administration of your business, like when that becomes your business, right? So years ago, I was younger. I was dating a woman named Erica, and she was awesome. She's still awesome. One day I called her on the phone and I said, "Hey, let's rent a car and drive up and down the Oregon coast." And she said, "Yeah, I don't think that's what our relationship is based on." And I thought that was a weird thing to say. And so I said, "Well, what is our relationship based on?" And said, "We have a relationship based on discussing our relationship." I thought that was hilarious. She was upset that I thought that was hilarious. And then we broke up. But it was hilarious. So I see this today all the time where people have a workflow that's based on talking about their workflow. So they get together constantly in these meetings to plan or to argue about what was supposed to be delivered and when, or who was supposed to do what, or dependencies or prioritization, or all of this crap that is basically just, we've set up such an incredible cluster work of communication that work can't get done because the communication is so unclear, right? So there are danger signs for when you have entered a cluster work situation. So the first danger sign here is prioritization. Like literally, like the first time that anyone says, I think we've got to get together and prioritize our work, that instantly means that you haven't planned effectively and that you have multiple people who think that there are different things that you should do first. So there's no clear workflow. There's no clear path to action for not just you, but a variety of people you work with. And the more that that clarity doesn't exist, you're going to have to get together and talk about it. And if you just get together and talk about it, you're going to keep talking about it. And so when that happens, you end up with a lot of these meetings without progress, meetings without products, meetings without productivity, meetings without production, meetings without people leaving the meeting saying, "Hey, my life is better after that meeting than it was before." So when you're in a cluster work situation, you have a lot of meetings. And then when you leave, you end up in a situation where you're like, "Well, that was another meeting. I'm sure glad we had that other meeting." So then what happens is bosses or customers or maybe other teams are constantly writing you and saying, "Hey, what's the status of this thing? What's going on with this thing? We don't understand where this thing is." And the thing, of course, isn't done because you're sitting around talking about the thing. Stop me if you've heard this one, right? Like if you have no idea what's going on, you're very lucky. You are constantly having meetings talking about work. You're not getting the work done, and now people are upset. Again, it can be bosses, it could be customers, it could be regulators, it could be the feds, it could be anyone who has some sort of interest in you completing your work, which you're not able to do now. So then what happens is you have these repeated status requests, and now you have to have new meetings to talk about the repeated status requests, right? So we have some failure demand here, and then we have failure demand of the failure demand. And then we have failure demand of the failure demand that's managing the failure demand. And then we have failure demand trying to figure out what the hell's going on with the failure demand that was managing the failure demand of the failure demand. And this is not an exaggeration. I would say that for people listening to this, you've either been through it or you're living through it right now to some certain degree. Cluster work is a real thing. It's a real problem. And we have to do something about it, because it's not just like, oh man, that's annoying. This is what leads to people quitting, or it leads to people showing up physically for work, but not showing up mentally for work. And, people like to talk about quiet quitting, but just disenfranchisement has been around a lot longer than quiet quitting. And it's so much worse than quiet quitting, because quiet quitting is like, oh, dude, you've checked out. but, but, but ambivalence is that you're there and then you're like actively working to just not care, and you've probably seen that as well. So we want to fix this. How do we fix this? So the first thing we need to do is agree on the work that we have to do. And I'm gathering that sounds pretty stupid. Why do we have to agree on the work that we're doing? Like, seriously, like, why would we have to do this? We have to do this because we don't do this. We do things like we have product owners that go off and plan our work for us. So then we don't understand our work. We don't understand our work. Therefore, within the team, we don't even agree on what we're doing because we don't know what we're agreeing on. Then our team is interacting with other teams, all of whom don't understand their work because their product owner is giving their work to them. The product owner doesn't understand the work because the product owner hasn't discussed the work with the team, and often not even with the customer. They've just come up with stuff that sounds logical and fits well into a functional requirement or a user story or some action item. So product owners, product managers, project owners, Mickey Mouse, everyone in the world, the Joint Chiefs of Staff need to get together with the people who are doing the work and the people who are asking for the work and figure out what you're doing. Then after we start doing these things, we have to agree on what we're communicating to each other. What do people have to know? When do they need to know it? Where does that information reside? How do I avoid having to search for it every day so I don't have to keep having meetings with people saying, hey, we discussed this last week, but I don't know where it is. It's buried in Slack or it's in Teams or blah, 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 blah. Then we need to agree on how we do the work and how we communicate the work and the learning from that work. Okay. So we're agreeing to a culture with a process. So culture and process are always tightly coupled. If they're not, then they will work at odds with each other, and you will have prioritization problems that require you to have meetings without products and get repeated status requests and blah, 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 blah. The disjointed nature of process and culture in almost every group I've been to leads to cluster work. So then now we've agreed on what we're going to do. We've agreed on what we're going to communicate. And now we've agreed on how we're going to work together. And then we have to do the things that we agreed to do. And we have to not assume, I'm going to make this one big too. Don't assume that people can tell you everything you don't know. This is why meetings suck. Meetings suck because you are getting together and asking people questions, and they don't know how to answer those questions in a way that will give you the information that you need. It never happens, and you know it. So we want to be able to visualize the work as it's happening so that we see the work. We see the questions that are coming up. We see things that are going well, things that aren't going well. We see decisions that are being made as they're being made. We see the learning as it's happening. And this isn't just in a Kanban, it's in a variety of visualizations to visualize specific problems or specific actions. But we set up a visual system that tells everybody what's going on, communicates it, and keeps that agreement fresh so that we can do those things. right? So we stay in alignment to get that work done. All right. That is this week's weekly gym. These are the things that we talk about in all the classes at Modus Institute, blah, 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 blah. Come on down if you're not here already. If you're here and you want to know more about this stuff, just ping me or ping Tony Ann or ping anybody on the faculty. This is the nature of work, and this is what we need to solve for every single day.